We always look at our entire roster and we survey, hey, what do we need, right? What do we need to win? What do we need to go to the Super Bowl? What do we need to win a Super Bowl and a world championship for this community? And in this case, we were pretty down in terms on the defensive side compared to the offensive side, and felt really good about offensively where we were at. We were able to add Joshua Palmer to the receiving core early on in free agency. And quite honestly, our numbers were down, just sheer numbers on the defensive side. So we're always looking to improve our team any way we can and feel pretty good about what we came out of the draft with.
Bills head coach Sean McDermott speaking with Matt Bove. Sheer numbers were down, happy with what we came out with. And one thing about all this, I put a Twitter poll up and would expect it to lean the way that it has, which is, the defense was down last year. What's the primary reason for that? And we could actually dig into that further. What's the number one reason the defense was down? Personnel, coaching/scheme, or if you want to go even finer, pass rush, or you could say third down defense. But why was the third down defense bad, right?
Right.
I think the number one answer could be a number of different answers that people out there have. If you want to give us a ring on that at 803-0550. But being there, our sheer numbers were down. They had spent a couple picks in a row with their first pick going to the offense, right? Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman. And maybe that's one of the reasons that the Bills' defense started to drift a little bit is that transition, Joe. They didn't have the top end. We're talking blue chip talent. The idea is to go for blue chippers to fill in the holes when Hyde and Poyer left and Trey White became not Trey White. I mean, Benford really stepped into that spot. But,
that's right.
it kind of fell apart a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, where were the areas they were bad? The third down defense, whenever they would kick into a lot of man coverage, especially, right, like at the end of the year, that became evident. Is it athleticism? Is it you just didn't have it? One thing they got a lot of credit for, having to rely on it might be the reason. What's something that this defensive staff gets credit for a lot, and rightfully so, it is they coach guys up that were not highly picked, like Cam Lewis over the years and Jamarcus Ingram and DeMar Hamlin. I mean, really, that's a lot of the answer. Look at a lot of the players that are, especially in the secondary, that are being asked to play roles. There are a lot of undrafted guys and later picks. And I think when you have a defense full of guys like that, you're just not going to be as athletic. You're not going to have as many of the tools, maybe, as some of the stud high picks are going to have. So when I see they're bad on third down, and I see Kansas City pick them apart when they wanted to play man coverage last year, knowing that Elam was one of those guys, and that's not true of him. He is the tools guy that didn't work out. I feel like it was an athleticism problem. And it was a problem that they had just had too many of we coach this guy up to be responsible and know our system. You said too many of those guys playing at the same time.
And they did coach him up.
They did. Like all of those individually. Cam Lewis as an individual story for the Bills is a good story. So is Ingram even. And so is, Benford is a great story. Hamlin is, of course, there's other layers to him. But him playing as a 6th-round pick for 2 different years is a good story. But their lack of blue chippers and lack of top 100 talent guys. Part of it is on defense. You've got a lot of players that are punching above their weight.
It's a little bit like, as we've talked about this, do we talk about receiver? Yes. But this offseason, it's been talking about safety and defensive tackle quite a bit. And
corner.
Sure,
corner.
But just in terms of what they've tried to get.
Oh, okay.
They have drafted a bunch of corners. They've tried to get a bunch of corners.
Right.
They spent a 1st-round pick on Elam, and Benford's that same year.
They traded for Douglas.
Yeah, they've
made investment.
They really invested in. If we're looking at it, and this is one part where Brandon Beane is correct, you can't invest in everything. But we get to look at what you have spent your time on. What do you spend your money on? What do you spend your draft picks on? And Bishop, he's their first safety pick since Hamlin, right? And that's a 2nd-round pick. I don't think there's another pick in there at safety. That's because they had...
I think if you're not right, then maybe there's one guy missing.
They had Poyer and Hyde. But what we saw from safety and from defensive tackle as this thing started to drop down a bit, Like Taylor Rapp is a guy they brought in for cheap and then re-signed on a very modest deal. When we were talking about whether they could do something in the drafted safety, it was about how, Rapp's a nice player. They've coached him up. And then defensive tackle was the other spot where, man, that had been years of being borderline neglected. Mm-hmm. You think about the guys they had in free agency at defensive tackle, and it is just scrap heap. And last year's safety room was a little bit of that as well, with Mike Edwards being the guy they signed. They bring him in, and we thought he would start, and he never played. He left before ever playing. So it is a point about this coaching staff has coached up a defense, and now what this draft does is maybe give them some better horses to work with here, whether that's Landon Jackson. Speaking of Landon Jackson, Brett Coleman, Underdog Fantasy, and the Bootleg Podcast has a lot of great film stuff. He just did a series where he picked one player from every team's draft class who will be the biggest impact player of the draft class. And he picks Landon Jackson for the Bills to be the biggest impact player they've got. Power on the outside, he'll make a difference for them in the way that they play. So horses for McDermott. Hopefully, coach him up the way you coached up this last unit, and we'll see what the results are.
Isn't it fair to say, though, that a lot of the coaching up is like all the players that I reference and you have are in the secondary?
Yeah.
Aren't they?
They coach up the secondary quite a bit.
Which is McDermott's background,
right?
Is the secondary. Whereas the defensive line, the thing that Beane's invested the most in on that side of the ball, has been more of high picks that, have been good, but nobody has really turned into... What did you even ask this question earlier in the week? Who's exceeded expectation?
Yeah, somebody brought up the point, what draft pick has exceeded their draft status?
Because I've got a lot of people in the secondary that have exceeded their expectation.
Benford.
Yeah, Benford has, and some of the undrafted guys we just talked about and others. Who on the defensive line has really exceeded their expectation? I think you have a hard time finding an answer to that question. They're good players, but Ed Oliver is a top 10 pick. Greg Rousseau is very good. He was a first-round pick. Maybe he has by a little bit. But it's different, I think, from that position grouping versus the others. And that's the position group that, like when Beane is talking to Tyler Dunn yesterday, and there are these comparisons being made to, like, okay, what do you want to really pull from the Eagles and pull from what the league is right now? I mean, Beane says there in that article yesterday, like, I want to go get Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. I want to get after those guys. And that's easier said than done, but that's the thing they've been trying to do for the better part of 6 years, and they really still haven't been able to do it.
803-0550, 1-888-550-2550. If you want to join us, give us a ring. It's still draft chatter. Still looking back. Any other free agents out there that could fill holes? I don't know. Elijah Moore was one that was...
He filled one of the last holes left, I think.
Yeah. And he kind of stood out like... We'll talk about a draft board. Like, this guy was sticking out on the board. I thought Elijah Moore was sticking out on the UFA draft board. Keenan Allen's another one you might think he might find a spot eventually. But
he was way less of a fit for here.
Oh, for sure.
Older and slot. And
for sure. They don't need a guy in the slot right now. Moore does a little bit of that with some vertical slot, of course, but he has outside stuff. So it was just a much better fit.
Yeah, I don't see anybody on the free agent market to me that it is any longer needed. What would be the position? What's the position where you feel like the Bills need one more guy? I thought that was receiver, and they got their one more guy.
Yeah.
So
you might say safety, but they signed Derek Forrest on a cheap deal, so he's been in the league. He's this year's Mike Edwards, is he not? A guy that's played for $1 million.
Yes. So look, right, another replacement level safety doesn't make sense. They don't need another veteran corner. They've already done that. And even like defensive line, they're totally done there. The numbers, there's so many numbers now at that position. That is the position I just kind of went through. Like, they haven't been good yet on the defensive line. They certainly are trying again. They've thrown a ton at that position. All 12 of those guys can't be on the field at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, it is going to come down to 2 or 3 of them, Sanders or Bosa or Hoyt or, Deion Walker, Landon Jackson. It's going to take 2 or 3 of those guys becoming better than A.J. Epinesa. It won't just be good enough if you just added 6 A.J. Epinesas. Somebody's got to pop on that defensive line for all of this to come together and work.
803-0550. Mike in Charlotte. Hey, Mike.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
Good.
Hey, good discussion. In fact, I responded to your Twitter poll. I'm actually the idiot that missed the fact that you put both in the question, and I'm like, hey, where's the option for both? But that aside, I answered personnel is the issue, and as I'm sitting here driving, I'm wondering if it might be more coaching, and I'll say this specific to the defensive line, because I think if you were to really boil it down, I just don't think we've gotten enough clearly out of our defensive line, both on the edge and on the interior. And I'm curious to your thoughts on our ability to develop players at that position. So hear me out for a second, right? Like we've had a track record, I think, of developing in the secondary, certainly at safety, at linebacker. But I think we've struck out on the defensive line, and even Ed Oliver to some extent. I mean, as a pick coming in the top 10, he's not lighting the world up, at that position. And I look at guys like Poona Ford and Tim Settle, who came here, couldn't get it figured out, couldn't get on the field, go somewhere else and have maybe better success. So with all of these young guys defensively, we can crap on McDermott all we want, but I just wonder, do we have the horsepower to develop players from a coaching perspective at those positions? Because if we don't, it doesn't matter what this draft, looks like on paper. We're not going to get the most out of these guys looking forward. So just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Mike, the other thing about that, thanks for the phone call, is the timeline. Like when will we expect, or when should we expect TJ Sanders to be a big-time difference maker? And it's something we got into a little bit earlier in the week where Dwayne Carter was a guy that we talked about this with Jerry O yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, Jerry Ostrowski was on the show. How Dwayne Carter came in, and he was the third-round pick the Bills got when they moved up from moving down in the Worthy trade. How early on it was, look at this guy. Nice pick, great spot. And then it kind of just drifted away by the end of the season, maybe a little bit like Keon Coleman, where whether it's rookie wall or it could be a lot of things, but by the end of the season, they didn't feel like they could play him. So each player's on their own little journey, and can they develop guys, and do they have what it takes to get those right players in? Sometimes the expectation is a guy shows up and is amazing in his first 5 games and then disappears. Sometimes it takes a year for a guy to get there. Remember the legend of Kiko Alonso? Mm-hmm. Kiko Alonso was, 5 games, 4 interceptions, second place defensive rookie of the year, and then how quickly did he become kind of a punchline?
Well, I mean, he never played for the Bills again after that season. Right? It was rookie year, and then
trade for McCoy.
Did he get hurt first and then get traded?
That's a good question.
He missed a season with an injury. I think he was still here when he missed a season, and then they traded him.
He tore his ACL, and then the Bills traded him.
But either way, he never played for the Bills again after that rookie season.
Which was a heck of a rookie season.
And he didn't become legend of Kiko Alonso would have been, this is going to be like one of the premier linebackers in football for 10 years, and instead he went to Miami, got dogged by rookie Josh Allen.
Right. Yeah.
So,
but why do we think that about him? Because there were splash plays. He got the ball back.
Right.
He made plays.
Right.
And then from there, nice career.
Yeah. There's this obsession about them building this defensive line too. Like they did it on the offensive line.
Yep.
Could it be a coaching thing on that side of the ball? I mean, how they operate, how they kind of the usage rates at that position. Aaron Cromer's credited a lot with coaching up the offensive line since he came here a couple years ago, and that lines up with their production, right? He gets here, they throw a little bit more at the position, and Spencer Brown gets healthy, and boom, there you go, one of the top offensive lines in football with the right coach and the right personnel. The defensive line, I don't know, tell me about their defensive line coach. I hear Aaron Cromer's name 10 times more than I hear about their defensive line coach. I always hear about and see the numbers on how they constantly rotate at the position. And that's even an exercise in you just don't have guys that are clearly better than the next level. You know what I mean? How much of, hey, nobody plays more than 52% of snaps on the defensive line isn't just that they like to rotate at the position. It's that you've never had an elite player. You never had TJ Watt.
Right.
Where, this guy's playing 90% because, what are you talking about? I'm going to take 30% of his snaps away and give them to Javon Solomon. Mm-hmm. So I think defensive line, maybe I would want to blame both a little bit, but more so personnel.
Does Von not count, or does Von's 8 games show that that's what that would do? Because Von's 8 games before he got hurt was watching a Hall of Famer.
Yes.
He would have 8 sacks in 8 games. And here's one thing you can do. And if you want to do this, you got 5 minutes today.
8 sacks in 11 games.
8 sacks in 11 games before he tears his ACL.
Yeah.
Okay, 8 sacks in 11 games. That's on pace for a 12, 13 sack season.
Yeah, roughly.
The funny thing about that, maybe not funny, but you got 5 minutes today, you know what you should do? Go search Von's highlights from that season.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only did he have 8 sacks in those 11 games, and this is where your point about, the blue chipper versus what do the coaches do to try to develop these players into great players.
Mm-hmm.
They were all game-changing plays. They were punching the ball out in New York against the Jets. That's the game. It might be the game that they lose to the Jets that year. They've got some stupid Jets losses in there. Or do they win with a comeback? But either way, Von is making third down stops and getting the ball back, and it is just routine. Did he have 2 sacks against the Rams in that opener?
Yep,
close.
He's the guy who chases Mahomes out of the pocket and then when he throws a pick in Arrowhead.
Yeah,
and they win that game.
He
should have been the closer when remember what is it? Is it 4th and 22 for Jefferson?
Yes,
against Cam Lewis.
Yes.
Justin Jefferson. Why is it 4th and 22? Because on 3rd and 10, Von got to the quarterback.
Yeah,
and that should have been another game he won for them.
That's right.
It became the dumbest loss you've ever seen.
Yeah, there's some players that are so good.
They were all important plays.
There's some players that are so good that they're going to fit in any scheme. And when they signed him early on, that played out. And maybe if you were someone that didn't love that signing because of the age, maybe you thought he's going to get hurt, it won't last, and of course it ultimately didn't last. If he had not, how about this?
But what are the odds they're going to have that again this year?
Oh, you'd have to find somebody, maybe get a little lucky. I mean, Von's a 2nd overall pick. He was supposed to be that his entire time. That's not a surprise.
Well, that is what Bosa's supposed to be.
That's right.
He has not had the career that Von Miller has at all. Even when he's been healthy, he's been great. But Von was one of the premier pass rushers ever. But that's why all these rookies on the defensive line, I respect that they're trying to build it, but I do wonder what kind of impact it could have in 1 year when you're relying on a lot of that to be rookies. But the guy at the top for this plan, for at least 2025, is you do have a former top 3 pick that has had Pro Bowl seasons, that has had double-digit sack seasons, and you just got to know if he's going to be on the field or not. Because if he is, wouldn't he be the most likely answer to, I've got a guy this year that's going to be doing all that. He's going to be making game-changing sacks at the end of games and pressures that force picks, that Bosa's the most likely player for this. 100% he's the most likely. Everyone else is a rookie. Except for Hoyt. I guess Michael Hoyt's not a rookie.
Right.
But he's suspended for 6 games.
Rob in North Tonawanda. Hey, Rob, good morning.
Hi, good morning, guys. I was listening to you guys earlier about Devin Levi and that. About, I look at, a lot of similarities between him and Ryan Miller's early career in that. Because I remember, how we started Ryan Miller in a couple of games before, and after his college career, he struggled in that. But then when we sent him down to Rochester, at least with the lockout, at least he had a chance to even start a lot more down in Rochester. But you notice that after his time in Rochester, it was he became amazing. He became, where we could make Marty Baron expendable or Mika Norton expendable, where you could put a veteran backup in that. And I do like Levi, watching him since he started here. It's he's in position. He seems more calm under pressure, and where it seems to me with Luukkonen, he's just. I like his game, but it's time for him to move on from him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it is different. Yeah, the Miller-Levi comparison is there. The thing about Miller, though, is he didn't become the starter until he's 25 years old. So you got the patience for that? Because Levi's 23. And sometimes it takes that long. Allmark didn't become the full-time starter until he was 25.
Would Miller have done it at 24 without a lockout?
Probably. Okay, yeah.
Maybe.
Probably. Right, he didn't have that opportunity. He had played 18 games before 05-06 and didn't necessarily go well in the 800s for save percentage, which is what Levi, I think, is for his NHL career.
Right.
So, no, I mean, what that is the right comparison in that just because Levi's played 30 NHL games and they haven't necessarily gone great, I don't take that as any discouragement that he's not going to become a top starter in the league. So,
803-0550. Thanks, Rob, for the phone call. 1-888-550-2550. Fifth-year options around the league. I had a stat of the day on the fifth-year option, and a small note that the Cowboys did not pick up the fifth-year option for Kaiir Elam. They traded for him.
They had the opportunity.
They had the opportunity to pick up the fifth-year option. They did not.
Yeah.